Hello, welcome to another episode of the Money Chisme podcast. And today's chisme, I am so excited because we are going to get into kind of like an investing 101, which is very important for first gen because we usually are kind of like don't know where to even start. So I have with me two guests this week. I have Chen-Chen and Konstantin Weitz. And they are from Nexus and they are going to be sharing their, investing expertise. So Chen and Konstantin, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
And thanks so much for having us, Violetta. Like Violetta said, my name is Chen-Chen. I'm also a first generation immigrant as well. So this is something that's incredibly near and dear to my heart. I was born in China and I moved here and grew up here in California. And yeah, like watching, I think my parents struggle living sort of their immigrant lives and then slowly making more sense out of investing and making more sense about their personal finances, I think really inspired me to take this very seriously. So I'm also a first generation college student as well. And yeah, super excited to have joined the Nexus team. We are, in our words, looking to revolutionize banking. We want banks to work for people. And we also want people to be excited about financial literacy and be excited about growing their wealth and learning about all the possible ways, to build really good, healthy money habits that we'll talk about today. So yeah, also happy to pass it over to Konstantin, my co-founder.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chen-Chen, and thanks for having us on your podcast. So yeah, I'm originally from Germany, so I also immigrated to the US. And yeah, for me, I think, investing has been one of those pretty amazing things in my life, right? Like I think my parents growing up, they didn't really know what to do with money, right? I think the biggest investing kind of thing they did was buy a house, right? But like anything excess, they would just leave in the bank account, right? And so when I learned about investing first, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible, right? Like we as like normal people can actually like own shares of companies and we can like actually like kind of be the boss of these CEOs everywhere. So they work for us, right? And so that has always been very, very exciting to me. And I think, it would be great if this message, right, can just be broadcasted further, right? And I think a lot of people really have benefited from it. And I think it can be very good for everyone.
I'm so excited because we're all kind of like first gen immigrants that, had to like figure out this finance stuff and, with me and, usually our community, nobody's there to teach us about any of that, especially investing. And I was, same like with Constantine when I found out about stocks and investing in that. I was like, I didn't know what like stocks were, that I didn't even know it was accessible to me or how to get started. I think the first time I heard about stocks was like when I got like my job that actually had like a 401k, and I didn't even know what to do with it. I was like, okay. So, you know, going to that, like basically what is kind of like investing in, like what is it basically?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then Constantine, I'll kick off some of the more nitty gritty to you. But I think the first and foremost that I wanted to get across was by you, the listener, by you, everyone collectively should have and rightfully deserve a place at the table when it comes to investing. And I think we are doing a better job of it now. But I think previously there was this sort of like misconception that investing is this intimidating world, right? That's only for the rich and wealthy. That who am I? I don't come from, like generational wealth where I don't have a very solid financial background. Why should I even care? And I think one of the biggest points that I want to get across is you should care and you should be at the table because people are benefiting from it and you absolutely should too. And the other point is it's not as intimidating if we really boil down to what it actually is, right? And Constantine, I can hand this back over to you to talk about some, I guess, like some of the easier ways or the more digestible ways to think about investing and how every person can be involved.
Basically, what investing means to me, right? It's not necessarily that you invest in stock or this or that, right? I think it's that you take matters in your own hand, right? And you start deciding where your money goes, right? I think like the first thing that everyone does is that they open a checking account, right? And they get their paycheck in there, right? And then the money sits there, and then the bank invests it for you, right? And they're making the money, right? And it really is quite a ripoff, right? Like, I mean, right now, if you have your money with Wells Fargo or something or Chase, right, they're paying you less than 1% interest, but they themselves make like 5% interest on it, right? So the first step is really, take it in your own hands, right? Take that, power away from the big banks and just start doing it yourself. And you can get a lot better returns. So, for example, right, one of the easiest things I tell people, right, when they're just starting out, right, I think one of the scariest things is when you're investing, there's always these disclaimers of like, you're taking on risk, right? You might lose everything, right? So I think a good thing to like dip your toes into the world is what's called US Treasuries. So you just start out the world by just loaning your money to the government, right? Which is like one of the safest things you can do. And is, by the way, the banks themselves do riskier things than that, right? They loan their money to like people like us who want to buy a house, who are much less credit worthy than the government, right? So you just loan your money to the government, right? You can loan it to them for like 30 days even, right? And then they give it back to you, right? It's a very low risk investment. You get a fairly fixed interest rate on that, right? Which these days is around 5%. If you want to make this very concrete, you can like open, not to pitch ourselves too much, right? But like you can open an account with Nexus, which is a company that we're running. It feels just like a normal checking account, but you now have the ability to invest your money yourself, right? And you can choose US Treasuries, and then bam, that's it, right? You open your account and you get, your money is invested, working for you, and you still have all the other features.
Something that I've read recently that really stuck with me is this idea of financial literacy, where, who really benefits if the world becomes more financially literate? And like Konstantin mentioned, banks are really in the business of taking, money from like you and us, right? Like to the tune of $17 trillion. There's $17 trillion of American dollars sitting in US checking accounts. And banks are in the business of, people not knowing that they can get more from that. And then they take that, they pull it for themselves. They earn these massive profits for their companies and, in good times. And then in bad times, they also get bailed out by US taxpayer dollars. So I think the thing that resonated with me is, and also why we're so passionate about increasing financial literacy, is financial literacy really just helps the person. Banks don't really want us to get knowledgeable about all these different ways we can make our money work for ourselves, because it's so much easier for them to take our checking dollars and use that as capital and as a tool for themselves. So I think one of our biggest driving factors is, throughout the course of our work, we've learned about so many ways and so many places to put our money where it's earning and growing for us. And we really want as many people to unlock this and realize how easy it is to also have that money work for them too.
I'm glad that you brought that up, was about, like Konstantin was saying, about how these banks do it anyways for us. And, we saw like in the news about like banks. I mean, I don't know if, you received calls. My mom was calling me like, is my, money okay with this bank and whatever else? Like, you're okay, mom, but, you should stop putting everything. Obviously, you still have your emergency fund, but you should start investing that money that you have in the bank. And, that gave me an opportunity to educate her on, the investing portion, because the bank is doing it anyways. They're making money off of yours, your hard-earned money, and giving you, basically nothing in return. I do want to talk about a little bit of that, I see your TikToks about like the compounding portion, because a lot of people don't understand, how that works. I know I've gotten a few questions on that, on, like, okay, how is it that I'm investing now? How is that going to keep building?
Happy to go through that. So I think in regards to compounding interest, I think the basic concept is money just grows and grows. And the bigger your sort of pile that you have that you're actually applying to that you're actually applying interest to, the faster that interest amount actually, actually accelerates. So let's say you start off with $1,000, right? Maybe in the first few years, if you're earning, let's say, like, 10% a year, which is the average S&P 500 return since inception. In the first few years, that's actually not a ton, right? 10% on $1,000 is like $100. But if you go into like year 15 and year 20, as that pile gets bigger, and maybe now your pile is like $50,000, 10% on $50,000 is $5,000 of interest. And that just keeps growing. And your pile gets bigger and your interest amount gets bigger. And that becomes a very exponential curve. So I guess the thing to worry about here is all of this takes time. And sometimes even the difference of 3 years over a 30-year 35-year span can be hundreds of thousands of dollars when you get into the years 33 to 35. So when we talk about time in the market beats timing in the market, I think that's it's a really well received and well repeated phrase, because it's about how long your money is actually just there working for you. And the later you are, you're losing some of the time advantages of compound interest.
Yeah, I think, right, in theory, this is exactly the right thing, right? And I think in practice, this means you should really, when investing matters the most, is when you're just starting out your career, right? Or when you're just starting out, adulting, so to speak, right? Because, right, like those early years, that's when your pile is going to grow, right? And get bigger, so that in the future you get more and more interest, right? So while it doesn't seem like it has that big of an effect right now, right? Because maybe you just don't have that much money yet, right? Getting in the right habit and starting that process, right, of getting compounding interest is actually really important, right? So I would anyone, once you're like, very close to retirement, maybe it doesn't even matter that much anymore that you invest, right? But if you're still early in your career, right, it's actually like super important to get familiar with those things.
I think that's one thing that people have a hard time grasping, because like they want the money there, and then they don't see the, like, I guess, the benefit right away. But to me, it's important that they do it anyways, because you're, with inflation, and, especially these past few years, you were actually losing money just having your money in a savings account or whatever. So back to like how Konstantin was talking about, like, people are scared and the risk and all that stuff, but I think it's a bigger risk to continuously lose money on inflation versus, trying something that's proven over time to make you money versus something that's proven with inflation to lose you money. So I think that's an important aspect that needs to be talked about to help, mitigate, help someone feel better about investing. What are some common mistakes that either you made or that you see people making?
I can start off with a very personal one. So I think just early on in my career, not really understanding all of the different investing vehicles that are out there, I think I had this misconception that investing was only stock. Like, investing meant I did a bunch of research and I picked a company that I thought was going to do well, and I was going to put money into this company, and that was going to be investing. So very, very early on, I invested in a small company at the time. Well, I guess not that big, but like, not that small. But at NVIDIA, they make computer chips, and they're a good company now. But there's definitely a bunch of volatility, right? There was one company that was being susceptible to a bunch of market conditions, and I saw my money go up and down and up and down, like sometimes dramatically, and I was like, whoa, this isn't for me. This is not what I want to do. So I completely took it out, and wasn't participating in investing for a decent amount of time. And I think that was one mistake I made, right? Which is just not understanding that investing didn't just mean one stock and you're gambling, right? Like investing, I think really healthy, smart, risk conscious investing should not feel like gambling. There shouldn't be a dopamine rush attached to it if the stock does really well one day or really poorly another day. I think smart, healthy, risk conscious investing is, putting something, putting your wealth into an investment strategy that you can see has worked over time, that you can see like the historical results, that you have confidence knowing that sure, it may go up a little bit, it may go down a little bit, but over time, this wealth grows. So I wish I could, go back 10 years ago and tell 21-year-old me to, hey, read up about index funds, right? Or like read up about like, what the lazy portfolio is, because there are so many more concrete, time-tested ways to invest and grow wealth.
Which is funny that you brought that up because I made the same mistake like when I was younger, because I had barely learned about stocks and what investing meant. And so I'm thinking, okay, so that means I got to find something and invest my money. And like I invested in some, at that time it was like popular to get those like wine subscriptions. And so I was like, oh, this looks awesome. I mean, I like wine. It sounds cool to me that, it comes to your door. And I'm not even going to say how much money I put on that. But, that was a hard lesson learned, because I thought, that's what it was, that you picked random stocks and you just invested in. But, there's easier ways, like how you were talking about the lazy portfolio and, all these other ones, the index funds, to where it reduces that risk and, basically not putting all your eggs in one basket type mentality. But yeah, so what about you, Konstantin? What were your early mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for sharing. I mean, I think my mistake was I just left everything in my bank account, right? And I just had like so much money there and it was just not earning anything. So, I mean, I actually learned about investing through just talking. I had the good fortune to have like very smart friends. Um, and they were like, look, you can't just keep all your money in your bank account, right? You need to start investing it. And I think the really good advice they gave me is, don't chase the trends that are like hip right now. Don't just like jump on NFTs. Don't like read that Facebook ad that's like, hey, we had like 20% return. Just look at the economy as a whole, right? Like if you look at the US economy or most countries' economies, right, they have developed over the last whatever hundreds of years, right? And they have actually grown, right? And that is actually literally what companies are there for, right? They're there to make profit every year after year after year, right? Economy as a whole is expanding, right? We're not just every year replacing all the stuff that we're breaking. We're actually building new cool things, right? We're making the world a better place. If you can be part of that, right? That's a way to really solidly in the long term make money, right? Like sometimes it can go up and down, right? Like sometimes we have a year where it's like, oh my God, COVID's hitting and whatnot, right? And it might go down for a while, right? But in the long term, right, if you believe this idea that the economy grows, that is a very powerful thing that I believed, and that kind of got me pumped over this idea that, okay, it's not just a scam, right? This is actually something that can work and can work in the long term. You don't pick an individual company and invest in that because obviously, there's lots of examples of companies that just go down the drain, right? And it's so hard to predict, right? No one really knows, right? But you can just, these days, it's so easy to just invest in all the companies out there, right? Either that be the entire United States or even worldwide, right? And that's really the power of index funds, where you can invest in the whole thing.
For those that don't know what like an index fund is, what is kind of like how, Chen-Chen would likes to say, in fifth grader terms, what is an index fund?
You don't just pick one individual stock, but you invest in like 100 or a couple of thousand, right? In every company that's publicly traded out there. You do that manually, you're gonna have, no time to play with your children anymore, right? It's basically a company that invests in all of these stocks for you, and then you just buy one individual thing, the index fund, and then you own all of that stuff. Maybe the one thing you need to watch out for are fees, right? Because that company is going to charge you a tiny bit. If they're a good company, they charge you a tiny bit, or it's less than, 0.1% usually of your assets under management per year. So that's the kind of thing you should opt for. And that's a really, really good way to start investing.
What are other things that you think are stopping people from like getting into investing?
I definitely have some thoughts here. So first, I think we briefly touched on, which just this whole intimidation factor, right? Like you are scared of things that you don't necessarily fully understand. And the stock market is a complex beast. And to be frank, I don't know much about the stock market. Like there's all these people yelling on like this floor, and there's all these computers and sheets of paper. I think that's what the media sort of hyper sensationalizes the stock market to be. So I think there is that innate fear of, I don't know how this works. Someone told me that I can lose all my money with investing. Oh, my checking account is FDIC insured. Let me just keep all my money in this checking account because I know that nothing is going to happen to it. So I think there's this sort of this fear of the unknown. And then I think there's also a second belief of, oh, investing means I put money away and I can never touch it. And I think there's also like, well, I want my money now. Like I want to spend and do nice things for myself. If I invest, it disappears into this magical black box, and I can't open this box until I'm 65. And I think that's another sort of common misconception that prevents people from actually taking that step. So I think those are the two that I've seen and that I've heard that really, cause people to think a bit more about whether or not they should actually do this. And I think the final point here is like, because it's unknown, I think some people also associate it with a lot of work, right? You got to sit down and learn about this. Do I have to read like a book on, how the stock market actually works? Or do I have to watch like hours and hours of YouTube videos, right? So, that's also part of the reason why we're here. I think we want to showcase that there are very easy and healthy ways to participate and immediately make a positive change to your personal finances in a way that's like you understand most of it, right? Like you understand like the theory and the concepts behind, for example, the S&P 500, right? If you just even understand, to Konstantin's point, that the world is growing, that the markets are improving, and that more wealth is being generated, something as simple as us participating in the S&P 500 means that you're not picking one company, you're picking 500, and they're all participating and they're all growing, and that reduces the risk of investing. I think even understanding some simple concepts there and grasping that, I think would definitely help people say, okay, cool, this is something that isn't super scary, isn't super risky, this may be something for me.
I think one problem is also it's so many terminology things that are so scary, right? Like you're just throwing here out the S&P 500, like everyone knows what that means, right? And then basically that means you're investing in the biggest 500 companies of the United States, right? Which is cool, right? Because you're now part of like most of the companies at least by wealth, right, that are operating in the United States. There are also so many people trying to tell you what to do and also trying to trick you into things. I actually always tell people you do kind of want to understand the basics, right? And maybe one final caveat is also understand what risk you want, stock versus bonds. When you invest in stock, that can be a little bit more risky because basically you're giving money to the company and you're saying, and they can decide how they want to use it, right? And it can go up and down. Another thing you can do is you can buy bonds, which means you're basically loaning money to companies. It's just inherently a lot less risky. And so when you start mixing those two, and maybe even mix in some US treasuries, you can get a profile where you can kind of choose your own adventure, right? You choose how much risk you want to take. There are good tools that can help you kind of visualize what that looks like historically. Like even on our website, you can like play with a slider and kind of just see what it looks like.
Like, how did you take that first step into like investing in?
For me, very similar to Konstantin was, colleagues that were at the time more passionate about this than I was, that actually did, go out and do the research and really thought about it. And sometimes those were my managers, at my previous job. These were mentors that, were talking about some of these things, more terminology, right? Like 401k, like IRA, like all these, a lot of letters and a lot of numbers. But people, I think, that were able to really distill some of these complex topics into like layman's terms. I think like I wouldn't know what a 401k is, but I know that it's like, oh, this is just an investment account that your company matches, that also you pay less taxes on later on, right? That was so much easier for me to understand than just some of these fancy terminology. So for me, it was a lot of either colleagues or mentors that were able to take these like complex things and just talk to me like if I were a 5-year-old and just say, this is how it actually works. And I think that really helped me get going, helped me understand. So I think like, for example, even the concept of like the S&P 500, right? Like you hear this everywhere, but like what does it actually mean? Like it literally means the top 500 companies in the US. And when you purchase, a part of the S&P 500, you're not just buying one company, you're buying like a small part of all 500 companies. I think just being able to explain that super quickly, as if, like I said, I were a 5-year-old, really helped me understand, okay, I get it now. Now I also get why this reduces my risk, because if one company, has a really bad quarter, the other 499 may not have had as bad of a quarter. And, just really being able to talk to people that are able to explain things in very simple terms.
What advice would you give someone that's barely starting out in investing?
Jump over that hurdle of actually opening an account where you can invest. Start with something like super easy and low risk. Start just loaning your money to the US government and see how it goes and get a bit of a sense for how it feels, right? And once you've gotten your feet wet, right? Once you actually have started like investing, think a little bit about if you can take on a little bit of risk. And this is really one of the fundamental things in investing. It's this idea of like risk reward, right? So like if you're in the safest thing of like giving money to the government, right? You get like a fairly fixed return, about 5% right now, right? But it's still so very low risk. If you take on more risk, right? Like say you start lending your money to companies, you end up taking on a little more risk. And then you also get more reward. And this is, I think, also why it's so intimidating to people, because when the returns go higher, right? They're not higher every year, right? Because that's like the definition of risk, right? Some years they're going to be lower, some years they're going to be higher, but on average they're going to be higher, right? The more risk you take on. There is also risk that's not compensated, right? Don't start buying lottery tickets, right? So right, like I think that's also why it's so intimidating to some extent, right? Because there are real traps that you can fall in, right? To some extent. And then if you're happy with that sort of risk curve, like the S&P 500, if you look at it's like 150-year history, I think the biggest drop was around 40% or something like that, right? If you're okay with that sort of risk, then you can get the potential reward, right, of the higher expected returns, which have been around 10% historically, right?
I would honestly say that we are a good place to start off. So we, the Nexus product, the first step really is just jumping into the water and opening up a brokerage account. And that can be intimidating at times too. So for us, I think we've actually designed our experience where you can't buy individual stocks on the Nexus platform. You can't buy crypto. And there are other tools out there that you can go and buy stocks and you can go and buy crypto. That's awesome. For us, we care about time-tested, trusted funds. So I think right now we offer maybe 6, very vetted funds from Vanguard and BlackRock. And, to Konstantin's point, we have a treasury fund, which is the equivalent of loaning money to the US government, right? And that's like lower risk, protected by the full faith and credit of the US government. A really good place to start off with if you just want to see what it's like to carry cash, not in cash, but in something that may gain returns. So honestly, I think we're a really good place to start, where we explain pretty clearly what each of these funds do. Like we have a bond fund, and we also have, an S&P fund where it's investing in bigger US companies. We also have a fund that invests in companies all around the world. But our biggest goal here is to sort of remove that guessing and that like dopamine and gambling out of investing, and really put money into places that are trusted, that have good management fees, that aren't there to rip people off, but to be a good place for people to invest in, and for the future and for growth. So
banks are investing your money anyways. I know we touched on the topic of like, you still want access to your funds. That's kind of the idea of Nexus. So tell me how, Nexus works.
at its core, we give you full access to your money, even if it's in investment vehicles. So when you open a Nexus account, let's say you bank with us and you carry $1,000 with us, we actually keep the entirety of that $1,000 in securities or in these funds, right? That may be earning returns for you, but you can treat us like a normal bank account. So when you go to the ATM, let's say you go to any ATM in the world, by the way, it's completely free with us. If you go to any ATM in the world and you want to withdraw, let's say $20, what we do immediately is we sell $20 worth of your securities, and in a split second, give you that cash, and then you have $20. Similarly, when let's say you go down the street to a grocery store and you buy $40 worth of groceries, same thing happens. When you complete that transaction, we sell $40 worth of securities immediately when markets are open, and then we allow that transaction to go through, and it's as if you sort of transacted from a bank account. On the other side, let's say you link us as your direct deposit for your paycheck. The moment your paycheck arrives into the Nexus account, we buy that amount of securities for you, and we keep all of your wealth in securities where they're earning returns, and not in cash where they could be actively losing value because of inflation.
We give you all the features of a traditional bank account, right? You have a debit card, you can write checks and all that good stuff, right? And your money is always instantly accessible, even when the markets are closed, even on the weekend, right? We're not the institution that just invests behind your back and then, makes returns for ourselves. We actually let you invest it and keep all the returns from those investments, right? And we're also very cost conscious, right? Like we don't charge you any fees when you make trades or when you buy anything. That's very important for me. I'm a very frugal guy, so I want to build a product that I would actually use. Right? And yeah, we then let you invest the money in a way that you see fit. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about like the whole Silicon Valley Bank stuff and so on, because we were kind of at the live seats when it happened. Like a lot of startups banked with Silicon Valley Bank, right? So actually, I'm in like this Slack channel of like other founders, and just it started blowing up, right? Everyone was like, pull your money out. And this was way before this was public news, right? No one had heard of this yet. This channel just starts blowing up, pull your money out, right? And then everyone, like, it's very interesting. Like a lot of these other banks actually had representatives in this chat, and they were like, oh, great, come over to us. We'll like speed onboard you, right? You can have all your money over at us. So it was like watching a bank run, live in the 21st century, where like it's all like online. It was very interesting to watch. But I think the sad thing underneath is that I really think our banking system is like so fundamentally broken. I think 100 years ago, this kind of made sense, right? Like banks were like just the only way to do things. Very concretely, what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, and which is happening with all the banks, which is why they're also screwed right now, is right, like over the last 10 years or something, they were able to lend out money. If you wanted a mortgage, you could get like money for 3% interest or something like that, right? And now there's this expectation that they need to pay 5% to anyone giving them money, right? because that's what the Federal Reserve rate is, right? And so you're now actually seeing all these banks literally losing money every month on these mortgages, right? That where they're only getting 3% on them, but they actually need to kind of pay 5% on it. So that's kind of crazy, right? And like the only conclusion here is that the government will potentially bail them out eventually, or they somehow make up for it by paying you terrible interest on your balance, and you're okay with it, right? We can actually make the world a better place, right? It's a cliche, but we can actually. We don't need banks that rip us off like this.
Back to how we were talking about, people being hesitant to invest because of the risk. Well, I mean, like we saw with Silicon Valley and other banks are doing it anyways and putting your money in risk anyways. And then, we saw that one close down or whatever. So might as well do it yourself and where you're a little bit more in control. So yeah, it sounds like, Nexus is going to be the next thing with banking. And I agree, Constantine, our banking system sucks. I'm over it. We need to move on. I'm tired of these bailouts and them doing whatever they want with our money and we get nothing in return. So yeah, I'm excited to see where Nexus goes from here.
Yeah, I think my parting thoughts here is I think it's about time people expect more from their banks, and I think this is a really exciting time to be in right now, where we have folks like us, right? And even if you don't work with us or you don't bank with us, I think what's exciting is more and more people are realizing that they can expect more from their banks, that they should be getting more control over their money and putting their money into good places. So even if it's not with us, I think it's super exciting to be a part of this and also encourage people to learn about brokerages, right? To learn about so many other options and so many other tools where, this is your money. You work hard for your money, and there should be no reason why your money shouldn't be put in a place that's also working hard for you. So it's super exciting, and I'm really, really passionate about like folks, more and more people realizing that this is something that they have full agency over. So it's a really great time to be in this. And also part of the reason that keeps us going day in and day out is we want to build this product because we think, it's about damn time that people take control over their finances and put their money into smart places.
So how can they, work with you? Like, how do they get with Nexus? Like, is it an app or what, is it like website? How can they get started with Nexus or work with you if they want to?
Yeah, so the easiest way is we have a ton of information on our website. So our website is www.nexushq.com. There is a link, there's a support email address on the website too. If there's any questions at all, feel free to shoot us a note that goes directly to myself and Konstantin. And we're very, very quick to respond with any questions. But there's a ton of information on there as well. You can click in and make an account directly on the website, or if you prefer to be mobile, I know some of y'all can't, stay away from your phones. We have both, apps available on the iOS and Google Play stores, and you can create an account there too. But yeah, I think most importantly, if there's any questions about, who we are, what our credentials are, what we do with your information, or what our approach to banking is, we're more than happy to answer any of that. I think for us, like, trust is a really big thing. And I've been so fortunate and excited to work with Konstantin on this because, I can see the amount of care and trust and wanting to be good faith actors in the space. I can see how much that matters to him. So the two of us are really aligned that, look, we're building this because we fundamentally believe that money should be working for people, and we're more than happy to answer any questions about that.
Yeah, I would definitely make sure to link that in the description of this episode. But other than that, I appreciate you coming on my podcast and sharing, your expertise, and definitely Konstantin giving me the backstory of when the Silicon Valley was going down. That was awesome to hear. It's like, because I did wonder, I was like, man, I wonder, how they were freaking out. So thanks for that small insight. But yeah, other than that, like I said, I will link everything down in the description. But anyways, that's it for this episode. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.